Inside the cave, the sound of flowing water echoed. Following Dalmia, Chris and Borelk moved forward in silence. After advancing for a while, they saw light ahead in the curved passage. The shadow of the flames floating on the wall dances as if it were bouncing. Glenn appeared before them, accompanied by 4 soldiers as they turned the corner. Standing in the center of the soldiers in front of a large spring where the waterfall cascaded down, Glenn deeply bowed upon recognizing Chris. On either side, the soldiers also bowed their heads while holding torches.
"We've been waiting for you,"
Glenn said with a smile as he raised his head to welcome them.
Nice to meet you, my name is Borelk.
Borelk stepped forward and introduced himself before Chris could introduce him. Then, as he walked closer to Glenn, he continued his self-introduction.
I am the only son of a blacksmith from the Wymelia district, and I always collect wurtzite and orichalcum from the seabed. Actually, I've always had a crush on you. The current underwater city exists thanks to you. Once, the underwater city was as polluted by darkness as the surface world. But it has become a noble civilization city alongside the 4 great cities like the underground city. All because you reminded us citizens of our pride as underwater dwellers. Despite being a prince, you have always acted without regard for danger, allowing each of us to find the light within ourselves. I truly respect you.
When Borelk reached out for a handshake, Glenn responded with a smile.
"Thank you, but I haven't done anything. I've just been doing what any underwater citizens should do for the underwater world. The evolution of the underwater city is thanks to all of you."
While gazing at Glenn with admiration as he spoke those words, Borelk shrugged his shoulders in reverence.
"Well then, shall we go?"
Glenn said, nodding as he looked at Chris.
"Oh, yes,"
Chris replied, while looking around. Almayan was nowhere to be seen. Then, Glenn said as if he had sensed it.
Almayan was suddenly summoned by his father and had to return to Atlia's in a hurry. She asked me to convey her regards to you.
Glenn said, looking disappointed as he lowered his eyes.
"Oh, really?"
Chris wondered if Gion has caught wind of something. Along with a feeling of disappointment, a sense of anxiety surged over him. Glenn smiled at Chris, who was showing a worried expression.
"Anyway, let's do what we need to do,"
Glenn said, nodding firmly and giving Chris's shoulder a reassuring pat. Then, he turned to face the spring. And he walked towards the spring where water cascaded down from the ceiling. On either side, a soldier accompanied him, holding a torch to light the way. Glenn and the soldiers are walking on the surface of the water without sinking into the spring.
"Let's follow after them,"
Dalmia said, gently placing a hand on Chris and Barak's backs to urge them forward. Chris and Borelk exchanged glances and began to walk toward the spring, as if prompted by each other. The remaining soldier raised a torch and accompanied the two. The surface of the water had a jelly-like elasticity. Seeing Borelk standing over the spring, Chris also stepped in. It was unstable, but he was able to stand up. However, if he stops, he will sink down like into a bottomless swamp. Chris hurriedly chased after Borelk. Glenn, who was ahead, was approaching a waterfall. Without stopping, he advanced towards the waterfall. Then, as if curtains were drawn from both sides, the waterfall split in 2. Glenn moved forward through the area beneath the waterfall with the soldiers. Chris and Borelk followed behind, passing through the waterfall in the same way. Beyond the waterfall, a dark cave continued. The cave had a gentle slope leading downwards. And as they descended the slope, it gradually turned into a gentle uphill climb. A bright blue light was shining down from the top of the slope. Leading the way, Glenn and the group silently ascended the slope. At the top of the slope, there was a space surrounded by crystals emitting a dazzling light.
"So far, We've managed to carve out a path somehow.
Glenn said as he moved to the center of the circular space.
The problem starts from here.
Glenn said, staring ahead at the 4 openings that gaped before him. It was a large entrance to a crystal cave, wide open against the blue glowing wall.
From here on, every path is like a maze, very intricate inside. And no matter how we proceed, we'll end up back here.
With a troubled smile, Glenn turned to Chris.
Are you sure Aqua is up ahead?
When Chris asked for confirmation, Glenn nodded confidently, saying, probably.
There were indeed several candidate locations on the seabed of Oceanus, but all of them have been cleared out. And we have confirmed that neither of them has Aqua. However, we have erased all traces of our investigation, and in fact, we have set a decoy. Therefore, those who came from other cities seeking the crystal element, including agents of the dark forces, should be frantically searching that side by now.
Glenn's explanation made Borelk nod repeatedly in agreement.
No wonder. I thought that if there were crystal elements, it would be in the direction where soldiers are gathering from Ahiku to Kanakor's exit. This is completely the opposite direction, and I don't think anyone would ever imagine there's a space like this here, right?
Glenn gave a smile in return to the impressed Borelk.
But no matter which way you go, you can't reach anywhere, right?
Chris pointed to the cave, and Glenn nodded.
Yes, even if we move forward, that is.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Chris didn't understand the meaning of Glenn's words and asked again.
In other words, it seems that only those who are chosen one can proceed further.
Glenn said, gazing intently into Chris's eyes. Then, he pointed to the dagger that Chris had at his waist.
If it is the Luberapis by the chosen one, the correct path should be revealed.
Glenn said, sounding somewhat excited. The calmness that had been in his eyes moments ago was gone, replaced by a glaring, self-righteous light.
Excuse me.
Seeing Chris bewildered, Glenn suddenly seemed to come to his senses and apologized.
Thinking about how my mission is finally being fulfilled made me unable to hold back my emotions.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Chris said, instinctively bowing his head.
So, should I activate the Luberapis here and now?
When Chris looked up at Glenn with his hand the dagger, Glenn nodded calmly this time.
Yes, please.
Chris nodded back and drew the dagger from his waist. Then, recalling the cantarmel that Martis had taught him, he positioned the dagger he held with both hands in front of his chest.
Ada Sire e Aqua.
As Chris loudly recited the cantarmel of Luberapis, the red stone embedded in the hilt of the dagger emitted a strong light. The light was so dazzling that he couldn't keep his eyes open. As the light gradually contracted, red beams were shot towards the crystal cave.